Well, members and guests, our guest speaker today, Sean Keenihan, his principal claim to fame is that he's a member of the Norwood Football Club, and when I stand shoulder to shoulder with him on the mound at Norwood Oval, I don't have to buy a budget because he knows the names and the heights and the weights of every player. He's a wonderful fount of knowledge. His lesser claims to fame is he's the managing partner of one of Adelaide's largest law firms, Norman Waterhouse, with a specialty in commercial law. Secondly, he's an expert on China. He's a fluent Mandarin speaker, expert in Chinese law, represents South Australian state government in dealings with China, and in fact he just flew back in from China this morning. So he tells me he's going to be a little bit woolly when he speaks. And finally, he's also the chairman of the South Australian Tourist Commission, and in that role he will be addressing you today. Would you please welcome Sean Keenihan.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and can I acknowledge Stephen Haynes, who's been a great mentor of mine over many years, both in local government and, of course, the history of the Norwood Football Club. Can I acknowledge the great privilege it is to speak to the Rotary Club of Adelaide and acknowledge the Rotarians and your guests and the wonderful work you do in the community. It really is a great honour and privilege to be asked to speak to you here. Stephen asked me to talk about a seldom talked about and probably less understood success story of South Australia's economic transformation, and that is the growth of what we call the visitor economy. Stephen's also asked me to talk about the growth that South Australia's engagement with China has seen and how profound that's been and how profound it will be into the future, because this is a story that we all need to grapple with because it's changing a lot of what we do and how it impacts what we do. My perspective, as Stephen said, is drawn from a number of roles that I have. In addition to the roles that Stephen mentioned, I'm also the National Vice President of the Australia-China Business Council, which is the peak body for China-Australia economic engagement. I'm the South Australian President of the Australia-China Business Council. I'm also the Chair of Study Adelaide, which is the South Australian International Education promotion body. So I wear a lot of hats, and why so many hats? Because China's growth and potential to capture just a part of that has been recognised as being so profound that I've been given the opportunity to represent the state, to represent business, to try and capture some of that for South Australia. And the reality is there aren't too many of us born and raised in South Australia that have had the benefit of a lot of experience with China. And I just happen to have that through having studied it at school, having lived and worked there, and having received a government scholarship to do intensive language there when I was much younger. So the challenge in recent years has been to move the conversation about our economic engagement with China beyond rocks and crops. Because rocks and crops, while that's great commodity-based work, contribute significantly to our regions, it isn't as impactful as value-added goods and services and the massive multiplier that comes from value-added products and value-added services being exported. So that's the real prize we've been chasing. So I'm going to highlight the impact that China's had so far in this area and what's still there for us. But firstly, I want to talk about the broader story around tourism. So since 2014, the South Australian Tourism Commission has had a stretch target to grow the visitor economy to $8 billion and in so doing create 10,000 additional jobs. This is what's written on my wall in my office. This is the thing that I get up every day, and it's the sole thing that guides what we chase, because $8 billion from a $5.1 billion starting position in 2014 is a big, hairy number that makes a big difference. So how have we gone since 2014? Well, we're up to 36,000 jobs. We've created 5,000 jobs since 2014 in the tourism space. And that's because the visitor economy has grown to 6.7 billion. So we've come off a $5.1 billion base to be at $6.7 billion. And it's not only international tourism, it's locals, it's interstate people spending, and importantly, about 40% of this expenditure is felt in regional South Australia. So while regional South Australia might account for only 23% of our population, they see 40% of tourism revenue. And that just exemplifies the importance of tourism as an industry to the regions in South Australia. Now, to put that achievement in some perspective, this is a graph, and it's a historical graph which I can see really helpfully down the bottom doesn't have any lines. I told you this would get woolly when I haven't had a chance to look at this before I got back this morning. But what it should say down the bottom there is this is back in about 2005, and you can see that we've been tracking like this for about 10 years. And then all of a sudden, since we had our strategy and we resourced right, we have kicked right up. And the trend line now, instead of taking us out to about there, which is 6.7, the trend line has us right on target for 8 billion. But this has been a pretty recent phenomenon, that trend line. We've only just started to really kick this into gear in the last couple of years. That trend line there represents 30% growth in the visitor economy in the last 4 years. Now, if you consider 30% growth against, over the same period, the state growing much, much slower, if you consider 15% employment growth, where over the same period the state grew at 1%, if you talk about 5,000 jobs being created in a sector over a 4-year period, we start to put in perspective the significance of what is going on. But we rarely hear about this. We hear all the fun stuff, the good news stuff about tourism. What we don't hear is how it's driving and underpinning economic prosperity in South Australia. So this was part of why Stephen wanted me to come and talk to you today, because he's sick of hearing me bang on about this on the hill while Norwood are 10 goals up and all interest has gone out of the game into the third quarter. So importantly, of those 5,000 jobs, 2,000 of those have been created in regions. So this is a story that everyone should understand and talk about, because we're not there yet. We're trying to get to here. Because if we get to here, that'll be 10,000 jobs. 10,000 jobs over 7 years. That's what we're chasing. Now, success has had 3 clear elements. Firstly, there's been a clear market-focused strategy. Our strategy's been driven by the consumer and by the market. We haven't said, what are we good at, and make it fit the market. We've said, what does the market want, and how do we adapt what we have to fit what consumers want? I know that sounds like a novel approach, but it's amazing how much you see in business and in government policy that we don't actually have a consumer-driven focus in our planning. Because it can be a pretty tough thing to actually wake up and acknowledge that your product or your offering is out of step with where the consumer is. That can be pretty confronting. But this is what we did in 2014. We unpacked it all and we put it back together and we focused on the consumer. The other thing we did was we got increased investment by government and we got increased investment by industry. Everybody piled in. When we work collaboratively in South Australia, we do things like this. That's what happens when we work collaboratively. We can do amazing things when there's an alignment of government and private sector. The other thing that's helped us in this period has been the state of the global economy, concerns about security in other markets, the Australian dollar getting to a more competitive price, for people to buy Australian dollars from offshore. All of these things have helped us. But at the end of the day, it's about strategy, alignment, coordination and investment by everyone. Now, I'm talking here, and you'll understand my language here, I'm showing you a graph. Success is not defined by the number of visitors. We're not into profitless volume, we're into yield. This is about the dollars in the pockets of business, not about how many people come through the door and buy packets of noodles and sleep on park benches. We're not after those sorts of tourists. We're after high-yielding tourists who appreciate what we have and are prepared to pay a premium for what we have. So when you hear people talk about the performance of the visitor economy in terms of visitor numbers, they're missing the point. It's actually about expenditure, what people spend. I'd prefer less people here spending more than more people here spending less. That's a sustainability argument, which is a whole other conversation. So, a bit more about the visitor economy and how we got here. I talked about jobs and what it's driving in terms of jobs growth. 18,000 businesses, that's a lot of small businesses that underpin what the state's tourism industry does. In terms of visitor growth, you can see that the growth in visitation is spread across different parts of our markets, international, interstate and intrastate, and spread across different parts of the world in terms of the international side. And likewise in expenditure, it's well spread. But the thing that really stands out about South Australia, and this is the thing that people really eat up, literally, and drink up about us, is our food and wine brand. Food and wine is the key positioning for us. And certainly in terms of wine, we're rated number 1. In number 2, we are desperately trying to strip that title off of Victoria. So if you're thinking food and wine, we want you to think South Australia. And that's why we do things like Tasting Australia, that I'm sure you would have heard about, that event that occurred in May this year. And that has just gone from success to success to success over the last couple of years. The other great thing about a growing visitor economy, beyond the economic impact it has broadly, is what it means for all of us as people who live here. You see, when more people are coming here and more people are spending money, more airlines turn up, and that's good for us when we're looking to travel internationally. So the number of airlines flying here now and giving us, places to go and visit, but I should say I'd prefer none of you went and visited anywhere else. I'd prefer you spent more time here, right? But these are some of the benefits that locals have. We see more investment in hotels. When more visitors come, when more high-yielding visitors come, people have confidence to invest in hotels. These are the things that are driven. And the other thing that gets driven when you have high-yield visitors, when you have high-end experience seekers, is new products emerge. New products that we get to enjoy. So the SATC has a real focus on curating and developing new products that meet the expectations of these consumers. And the great thing about these new products is they're there for us to enjoy as well. And that one in the background there is where you can walk out at Port Lincoln in your pair of waders and eat oysters directly off of the oyster farm. Doesn't get much fresher than that. So while all of this has been no accident, I want to talk to you in particular about how we went about the China thing. Because the China thing and what's happened in terms of Chinese visitation to South Australia is another story in and of itself. We set targets and established a strategy a few years ago called Activating China 2020. And we didn't just set targets and then, and you can see there we set a target of 57,000 visitors by 2020. So when we had that 8 billion target, we were looking for 57,000 visitors by 2020. And that's the trend line there, about 35, I think. That's our stretch target. That's our maximum projected number. So what we did was, rather than just say, well, that's our target, let's hope they all turn up, we've gone about creating tools to help business service these people. We've tried to focus on the types of visitors that will spend more. Not just people following a flag around, but people looking to really go into and really have an enriched experience around our food and wine and nature that we offer. Now, with that 57,000 visitors, we were targeting by 2020 $450 million in expenditure. And we're also targeting to get China Southern to fly direct here. That's what we were targeting. And here's how we've gone. So we're 3 years out from 2020 and we've already got our 57,000. We're also up to $415 million in expenditure. If I was to add up the additional money that's come into Adelaide from Chinese visitors in the last 3 years, if you went back 3 years and you added up all the new money that's flown in the last 3 years, it's around $500 million, which is about the number I said to Martin Hazy actually when he first took over, and I said, this is something you need to be aware of. This is going to change the face of the city. You're going to see more of these visitors and they're going to have a $500 million impact. So, and the China Southern, what's happening is China Southern are responding to this and they're putting on more flights, which will bring more people. And one of the key reasons we've done so well is this person here. This is a fellow by the name of Huang Xiaoming. Huang Xiaoming is the Tom Cruise of China, only he makes Tom Cruise look anonymous. This guy has over 50 million followers on their version of Twitter/Facebook. He's rolled gold. And we brought him here. He's standing here at Remarkable Rocks. If you look at Chinese social media, you will see any number of kids in exactly that pose, on exactly that position. In fact, I'm quite worried that that's going to fall off. The number of people that are putting their foot there at the moment and having their picture taken. We also had his picture taken hanging off the grandstand here, down at the Cube at Darrenberg, driving along the beach at Selix. We got these hero shots that now Chinese people are literally coming in to South Australia and they're going to operators and they're saying, what he did. I just want to do what he did. So this is where we've been very innovative because Australia had never targeted anyone like this before. And little South Australia, we went and got Tom Cruise and George Clooney all in one. Right? So South Australia's been very innovative in how we've sought to supercharge this. But when you've got a target like 8 billion, you can't expect to do more of the same and get a different result. You've got to do things differently to get a different result. So we've had to do things that are innovative like this. The other thing about Chinese tourists is they don't just come here to look at food, wine and nature. This is a report that you can find on the Australia-China Business Council website that we helped author. This is a report that tells you that when surveyed, Chinese visitors are here looking for more than just food, wine and nature. They're looking for brands that they can bring back and sell to their friends. They're looking for investment. They're looking for education for their kids, and some of them are looking for economic migration opportunities to invest here and become a resident. Chinese visitors are not just your typical standalone experienced visitors. There is a huge value add with them. And to give you some sense of that, if you look at over this period when Chinese visitation has been increasing, look at what else has been happening. This is Wine Australia's latest report. This was hot off the press a couple of weeks ago. So China, there's a lot of data there, but here's the main thing. China is now the biggest market. It grew by 55% last year. Right? 3 years ago, China was down here. And it's gone 50, 50, 50 the last 3 years. And here's the other thing that's happened. You see the price, actually you can't see those prices there. These are the prices per litre. $100 to $199 per litre, up by 66%. 50 to 100, up by 86. 30 to 50, up by 55. This isn't all just Stephen Haynes, right, buying the top-end stuff. Right? In fact, the growth in cheaper bottled wine is far more modest than the growth in more expensive wine. And that's because Chinese people love buying the expensive stuff. This is the value, right? This is the value that Chinese people are buying now. Not the volume. If I showed you the volume graph, you'd see the UK at number 1, the US at number 2, and China at number 3. They buy less, but they spend more. They buy less volume, but they spend more per bottle. So there's this myth around the Chinese being unsophisticated buyers, unsophisticated tourists, unsophisticated consumers. They love what South Australia has, and we love that they pay a premium for what we have. Because what we all know about our bottled wine is someone grows it in the vineyard, someone tends the vineyard, someone cuts it off, someone transports it to the winery, then someone crushes it, then someone puts it in a vat, then they put it in barrels, often barrels that are coopered here. Then a winemaker puts their craft on it for a year or two. Then they store it in someone's warehouse. Then they put it in the bottling plant. Then they put it in a bottle, they put a label on it, they put a cap on it, they put it in a box and they take it to the wharf. How many jobs are in that? A bottle of wine is one of our most sophisticated advanced manufacturing products. And this is the prize. Not stuff you dig out of the ground, put in a container, put a scientific form on it and say, good luck. There's no value add there. This is the real value for us. This is a huge multiplier. And this is what Chinese tourists are seeking out. And the more wine they buy, the more they want to come and find out where the wine came from. Same story in international education. Did you know international education is now our second largest export? A service is our second largest export, unsurprisingly behind wine, but ahead of wheat, ahead of meat, ahead of copper and all the other ores. A service is now our second biggest export. Guess who's driving that? I've already shown you who's driving that one, the wine. That's right, the Chinese. 41% of our students are from China. Now, when I say 41%, that's by number. If I went by yield, the Chinese are mainly doing degree courses where they're spending up to $40,000 a year on tuition fees. So it's more like 55 to 60 in terms of value that's being contributed in this sector. This is another sector that's growing at around 9% per annum in terms of revenue. And then in terms of the property sector, you're all very familiar with what's happening in Chinese investment into property. But I can tell you that it's about 25% of the pipeline for new development in South Australia, in the city of Adelaide, is Chinese developer backed. The other thing, I should have told you a story before I come to that figure. The other thing that's happened is when these people have come here, they've then sought out, they've looked at economic migration. Economic migration is a program where if you come here and if you invest money or if you support exports of South Australian companies up to around $1 million per person, you can get a permanent residence visa. Okay? South Australia has targeted this visa category and we've secured 1,500 of these people who we know, on average, will not do the minimum $1 million, they'll bring $2 million here. These 1,500 people have been approved and they will start to land here in the next 3 years. In the next 3 years, 1,500 people, each spending $2 million, will land in South Australia. That's $3 billion. Then there's tourism, then there's wine, then there's property. It all adds up to around $4 billion over the next couple of years. So this is a number worth reflecting on because I hear a lot about the defence sector and the opportunities it's going to present for our state. This is new money. This is not recycled money. This is not taxpayer-funded money. This is new money. This is money that we're competitively winning because of our proposition. This is really exciting. And the great thing about this money is it's shared across our regions, it's shared between industries, it's this ecosystem that feeds upon itself. Those international students become alumni. They go and do things in their own country and they come back to Adelaide, and what do? They invest big because they're confident here. And we're creating more and more alumni every year. We're creating more and more tourists who love the place and say, I want to send my kid there. We're putting our wine on the palates of people who say, I want to go and find out where that came from. I want to go and have that experience myself. And that's been the exciting bit for me, is seeing this all unfold. These are very significant numbers. You know, the state's gross state product grew by, I think 1.9 billion last year. This is effectively, over the next 3 years, this is effectively 2/3 of the state's gross state product, right, in the bag that's coming, that we've built a pipeline for. But as you can all probably tell from the conversation, we can do much better. There's even more we can do. So I've been really privileged to be able to play a role with government to support industry to drive this and find new sources of revenue with associated job creation. You know, a significant number of jobs created by this. We've had a strategy and we've achieved a lot, but as you can see, there are bigger, longer-term benefits and broader-based benefits still to come from this. And I think it's a phenomenon that's worth us all getting our head around. So thanks very much, folks, for your attention. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Sean. And if you think he's enthusiastic, just wait till the grand final.